Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Boy, I wish I'd said that. I always use it, but I always quote Lloyd. We have two photographs here I wanted to point out to the listeners on our Talking Points page at our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, and on the Talking Points page for this show, and perhaps Mr. Cremo could comment on these photos. One is from the Paluxy Riverbed in Texas, which is a fossil treasure trove, pretty much, and what appear to be dinosaur footprints and human footprints appear to be side by side in this riverbed. And there's also one which I believe was found in Utah, and it looks like a human shoe stepping upon a trilobite, which of course lived about 500 million years ago and was an ancestor of the horseshoe crab. So are these among the, now these are mentioned in your book, so these are among the fossils you consider to be legit?
The second one is included in my book. It's a footprint, well, actually a shoe print, as you point out, that was discovered by William Meister near Antelope Springs in Utah. And it is found in layers of rock that date back to the Cambrian period, which means, it's over 500 million years old. And the way that it's dated is, as you point out, in the shoe print is a fossil of a trilobite, which is a kind of shellfish, ancient shellfish that's extinct. It's been extinct for many hundreds of millions of years, and it's present in that shoe print.
Okay, let me just interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt for a second, but anyone who's listening on a computer, and you have us on internet TV, our producer Craig is holding up that photo now, so you can see it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. So now, my co-author Richard Thompson actually went and visited with Mr. Meister, the discoverer of this footprint. So he actually viewed the shoe print, and he actually photographed the original specimen. And we like to do things like that. Now, with the case of the Paluxy footprints, at the time I was researching forbidden archaeology, there was some controversy about those footprints. The person who originally reported them was Henry Morris, Jr., and he was a biblical creationist, and he reported these human footprints existing alongside the dinosaur footprints at the Glen Rose site, the Paluxy River site near Glen Rose, Texas. But later, he withdrew his claims. He decided they weren't really human footprints. They were just dinosaur footprints that had been eroded to look like human footprints. So on that basis, I decided not to mention this case in my book, Forbidden Archaeology.
I see.
But later developments have convinced me that there really are human footprints in the Paluxy River. What happened is this. An archaeology student from Texas got in touch with me and said, is there anything I can do to help you in your research? And this happens to me quite a bit. I get students and other researchers asking if they can be of assistance. So I told this archaeology graduate student at a university in Texas that it would help if she could go personally to the Paluxy River site and give me her impression as an archaeologist of what the evidence really showed. So she went there, and she participated in some new excavations that were going on at the Paluxy River site. And in these new excavations, new human tracks were uncovered next to dinosaur dinosaur tracks. And she expressed that, in her opinion, they were genuine human footprints. And she provided me with photographs of them and with reports from scientists who were studying them. And she also gave her own impression. So on that basis, I now think that there are genuine human footprints in the same formations in which we find dinosaur footprints at that Paluxy River site, which goes back over 120 million years. It's from the Cretaceous period. That's a geological period.
Actually, I've seen them myself, and I not being a trained anthropologist or archaeologist, they look human to me. Hey, Ben had our next question here too.
And I do. It's more of a contemporary question instead of paleontology. Why are the mainstream scientists so hostile to your point of view?
Well, they're not only hostile to my point of view, but to a lot of others who share similar ideas. I'm not alone in this. But I think the reason why they are hostile has several sources. First of all, it's just human nature. For example, if I love someone and someone tells me something bad about the person I love, I don't want to believe it. I may even become angry at the person who tells me. So today, many scientists are very much in love with the Darwinian theory of evolution. And whenever they hear anything that contradicts the theory that they love so much, they don't want to believe it. They may even become angry at the people who are reporting such things. So that's one reason. I think it's just human nature. But beyond that, it's a question of power. There are different kinds of power in this world. There's political power, there's military power, there's economic power, there's also intellectual power, which is a very subtle power, but a very real one. And we see that those who have monopoly power don't want to give it up. For example, if one political party has a monopoly in the political life of the country, it doesn't want to give up its position. If a certain corporation has a monopoly in a certain sector of the economy, it doesn't want to give up its position. It's sort of natural. You would expect it. So for the past 100 years or so, the supporters of the Darwinian theory of evolution have had, in this country and many other countries around the world, a government-enforced monopoly in the education system and the scientific institutions. Only their ideas can be taught. And if any alternatives are introduced, the government, through its judiciary, says, no, that's unconstitutional, you can't do that. So these supporters of the current theories now have a government-enforced monopoly in the education system. That's a very strong position. Only their ideas can be taught. Only their ideas are considered legitimate. So that's a very strong position to be in, and I'm not surprised that they want to defend that position. They want to resist any opposition to it. They want to continue having a government-enforced monopoly in the education system and scientific institutions.
Rather frightening, if not ironic. Well, we're going to pause for a commercial break, and we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal with Michael Cremo.
Is your business getting the necessary exposure? American Beauty Sign Works, your local sign experts, can help you answer yes to that question. Whether you're in need of a sign for your new business, a new look for your existing sign, or repair on your electrical sign, they're equipped with the newest sign-making technology and have the expertise to get your business the recognition it needs. Conveniently located at 345 Providence Street in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, American Beauty Sign Works strives to help you succeed in properly marketing your business. We offer a large variety of services, including business cards, letterhead, logo design, automobile wraps, awnings, banners, digital graphics, marquees, magnetic, neon, political, and real estate signs, storefronts, vehicle lettering and graphics, vinyl signs, and website design. To find out about the most cost-effective way to market your business, call us at 401-767-2922. Visit us on the web at absignworks.com or come to the shop and meet with Chad or Kurt and get the most from your marketing dollars.
Okay, we are back behind the paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and our guest today, Michael A. Cremo, Maverick archaeologist, author, and thinker on the subject of a long, long history, much longer history of the human race than we're used to thinking about. And I might add one thing to what you said, Michael, before, and that's that when speaking of human nature and mainstream scientists, I mean, who are, of course, victims of human nature just like the rest of us, when you spent $50,000 to $100,000 to study a certain subject a certain way, and what you've been taught is questioned by someone perhaps who doesn't have the same degree or doesn't have the same background, then you resent it naturally. And I think that's a factor as well.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Of course, the founder of the theory of evolution, Charles Darwin, didn't have any other degree than a degree in theology.
That's right. He was quite a religious fellow, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So he was a non-professional himself. He didn't have a position at a university. That's one reason I have some respect for Charles Darwin, is that he didn't have a PhD. He wasn't a professional scientist. He was a gentleman scholar living off his family's money and just doing research as an amateur. And his most famous book wasn't published in a scientific peer-reviewed journal, was published by an ordinary commercial publisher. So those are some interesting facts
for
people who have those kinds of attitudes.
Well, let's get a little deeper then into our subject at hand. There are those who will ask, of course, how did human consciousness come about? And of course, you and us, we take a spiritual approach that others might not. But at what point did human consciousness come about? If our species is as old as you're suggesting?
Well, here's what I propose. Now, today, most scientists believe that a human being is simply a very complex structure of molecules, ordinary material elements. And they believe that when these molecules are organized in a sufficiently complex way in the brain, in the human brain, then consciousness develops. What we call mind and consciousness develop, but only in connection with these molecules, which are organized in very complex ways in brains of humans and brains of lower species as well. But this means matter is primary and mind and consciousness exist only temporarily as byproducts of bioelectrical activity in the brain. So once the chemicals are disorganized, then there's no more mind, no more consciousness. So under that point of view, matter is primary. But what I'm proposing in my work is that it is consciousness that is primary. It is consciousness that always exists. And originally it exists in a pure state. It is only when consciousness becomes afflicted by selfishness that it enters into the material level of reality and accepts vehicles made of matter. That is another word. Vehicle is another word for body, a body made of matter. Now, as human beings, for example, we're normally meant to exist on the land. If we want to exist in a foreign element like water, then we need a special vehicle. We need a submarine or a diving suit that will allow us to function in the foreign element of water. So, naturally, as beings of pure consciousness, we're meant to function on a level of pure consciousness. If we enter into the realm of matter, we need vehicles that will allow us to function in the level of matter. And that's what these bodies that we now inhabit are. They're vehicles that allow a conscious self to function in the world of matter. And I believe these vehicles have two purposes. One is to allow us to function in the world of matter, but the human vehicle has the special feature of allowing us to return to the level of pure consciousness if we so desire. So what I'm saying is, on this question of the origin of consciousness, is consciousness doesn't have an origin. It always exists. It's eternal.
Yeah.
But under certain conditions, this consciousness can enter the world of matter where it must have material vehicles in which to function on this level. And these vehicles can take the form of plants, animals, human beings, fish, insects. All of them are vehicles for conscious self.
Yeah, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm following you absolutely. I think the problem with modern education and many of our modern institutions and our whole way of Western thinking, of course, as everybody knows, maybe not everybody, but started with early Greek philosophers and later Greek philosophers who developed particularly Plato and Aristotle, who developed the idea of deductive reasoning. That led, not to oversimplify it, but to scientific materialism, that essentially matter is all there is, and whatever happens is the interaction between matter and other matter. And everything else that we've been discussing was crowded out. The whole notion of consciousness not being chemically based, and the whole notion of spirituality, etc., and anything else that might not be readily attachable to matter was pretty much pushed out. And I think it has brought to our not only a very incomplete view and a very frustrating view of ourselves and of our world, I think it has introduced a certain amount of narrowness and a certain undercurrent of stupidity, for lack of a better word, in all of our thinking. And hence, people don't get it when you talk about your excellent ideas. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, some people don't get it. Many people do.
True.
I think that's why there are shows like yours. There are science conferences that deal with alternative ideas. There's the Institute for Noetic Sciences. There's organizations like that. But you're correct that there are certain scientists and a certain percentage of the general public who find these kinds of ideas a little difficult to grasp. Therefore, I think it is important to try to educate these scientists and general members of the general public in terms that they're prepared to accept. For example, there is quite a bit of scientific research evidence that suggests there is a conscious self that can exist apart from the body. There are medical studies of out-of-body experiences, for example. The American cardiologist Michael Cremo heard many of these reports from his heart attack patients. They would report separating from their bodies, and they would look down and see what the doctors and nurses were doing to try to revive them in the operating room. So this is something that he wondered about. Are these people telling the truth, or are they just making up stories? So he found a way to test what they were saying. He carefully interviewed about 25 heart attack patients who had reported these out-of-body experiences, and then he compared what they said to the detailed medical records kept by the doctors who had treated them. And he found that the description given by the people matched the descriptions found in the detailed records kept by the physicians who had treated them. So this gave a way of checking what the people said. It's not just a question of believing them. Many people report out-of-body experiences, and you can just, one way to look at these reports is, well, You can believe them or not.
Yeah.
But he found a way of scientifically verifying that the reports were accurate, that they were true. And this is... Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You brought up something very interesting. We had a guest on our Sunday show a few weeks ago, Dr. Michael Persinger, and Ben had a question in reference to that because it gets into exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, from your point of view, like Michael Persinger, he came up with this thing called the God helmet, and it was a bunch of it stimulated a bunch of sensors in your brain that would simulate the near-death experiences and experiences of God and spiritual experiences and stuff. What's your opinion of that?
Well, the kind of evidence that I'm talking about rules out that sort of explanation. That is Dr. Persinger is giving the kind of explanation that those who believe that consciousness is chemically based would want to give. They would say, well, yes, there are some neuronal structures in the brain which, if stimulated, will give off chemicals that will cause the brain to feel like it is out of the body or something like that. In other words, it's not that there is really a conscious self that is really going out of the body. It is just, Dr. Persinger, I believe, would propose, he could correct me if I'm wrong, it is just a sensation that is produced bioelectrically, neuronally, within the brain. There really isn't anything going outside the brain, outside the body.
Well, this is what we asked him, and frankly, we were prepared to blow him out of the water. But I came out and I asked him, I said, does this mean that the fact that you can, or the apparent fact that you can stimulate these experiences, does that mean they're not real? And he didn't say no, or rather, I mean, he didn't say yes. And actually, his answers to these questions was rather reasonable from, I guess, my point of view, and I'll go as far as to say our point of view. Excuse me, because he seemed to acknowledge the idea that consciousness and reality are much bigger than the material, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, if he did that, then that's fine.
Yeah. So now, whether we misunderstood him, but he did seem to have a reasonable approach to this. But anyway, we're going to have him back and continue because this hour show never gives us enough time. But that did seem to be a much more reasonable approach than I had expected from him. But in any case, let's get into some more fossil evidence, and I wanted to bounce a few ideas off you to see what you had thought, because our approach at times in our careers, I guess, has been similar. When it comes to research on the past. Now, I relied, of course, I had a long seminary education. I relied a great deal on ancient languages. And I believe that, as most people do, I think, who are into the field, that folklore and myth are the vessels of the memory of the human race and are to be taken seriously. As not to the point you have, of course, but I visited with Aborigines and talked with various elders and shamans and about their oral traditions, things of this kind, and I think it's to be taken seriously. Our ancestors were not idiots by any means. So the conclusions or ideas that we've reached have included such things as, and a lot of our work is based on the multiple worlds theory of quantum mechanics. In other words, when we're researching ghosts, I long ago came to the conclusion this is probably isn't some kind of spirit of somebody who's died. It's the actual person, body and all, going about their daily life in a parallel world, and the membranes, as physicists might call them, are thinner in certain areas. But that's the working hypothesis that we use. Do you believe it's possible that some of our traditions and our history, our prehistory, could have been influenced by people from other worlds? And I'm not necessarily speaking from the von Däniken approach, but other humans who might have come in, because I've seen a lot of evidence of that, circumstantial, of course, whether it be people disappearing and appearing somewhere else, even if it's in the Paluxy riverbed in Texas, or things of that kind. Do you think there's any validity to that approach, that maybe there have been influences way back from people from elsewhere or else when?
Yes, I believe that's true. Of course, the two ideas aren't mutually exclusive.
No.
There could have been ancient people existing on this earth a long time ago, and there could have been visitors from other parts of the cosmos, even from other dimensions, from other universes.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this is true. From my point of view, we're part of the whole cosmic hierarchy of beings. It's not that intelligent, conscious life, human-like life has just existed on our planet. Actually, according to the ancient Sanskrit writings, there are 400,000 human-like species scattered throughout the whole universe. And there has been communication between our human-like existence on this planet and the human-like existences from other planets and other levels of reality or even other universes. I believe that's a fact of human existence.
So do I.
And so yes, I accept what you say, that there have been contacts. You could call them extra-dimensional or extraterrestrial contacts. And it's interesting, however, that even modern scientific archaeology is beginning to accept this. I'm a member of the World Archaeological Congress, which is the world's largest international organization of archaeologists, and it holds a conference every 4 years in a different country. And a few years ago, the conference was held in the United States, Washington. I went to it. I presented a paper there. But I also noticed that on the program, there was a section on extraterrestrial archaeology. Now, the archaeologists were concerned about two things. One is the things that we've sent to other planets. We've sent probes to the moon, to Mars, to Venus. So one thing they were talking about is how will we as archaeologists handle the things that we've sent to other planets? So that's one dimension of extraterrestrial archaeology. But then they were also considering, what are we going to do as archaeologists if we find things on our planet or other planets that have been sent there by intelligent beings outside our solar system? They're really starting to think about that.
Well, rightly so. Well, we're up against a break here, and we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal with Michael Cremo. Stay with us.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
Okay, we're back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and we have with us Michael A. Cremo today, Maverick archaeologist, author, and all-around terrific fellow to talk to, I think, because we're having a great conversation. We have to cut off a little early today because of the Bryant University football game, I'm afraid. But we're going to have Michael back on our CBS show on Sunday night as soon as we have an opening, because this conversation is great. I wanted to ask some more about fossil evidence, but I think we'd better get to at least one or two of our emails that came in from Mr. Cremo. And one of them is, let's see, this is from Mark G. in Cumberland, Rhode Island, but he asked the same question we just asked, so about parallel worlds. This is from Kathy Turgeon in Worcester, Massachusetts, and she asks, I'm a graduate student in archaeology. Does Michael Cremo think I'm wasting my time? If not, how can I express my support for alternate ideas without getting an F?
Well, that's a very, very good question. There are in the world of archaeology today those who are interested in alternative approaches to archaeology. They understand that in 19th and 20th centuries, archaeology and anthropology were used to suppress the worldviews of other people. So many archaeologists today are very interested to hear what archaeology looks like from different cultural and spiritual perspectives. They're interested to hear, well, what does archaeology look like from an Australian Aboriginal perspective, or from a Mayan perspective, or from all kinds of other different perspectives. And that's one reason why I have been able to get a hearing in archaeological circles. I have been invited to give papers at meetings of the European Association of Archaeologists and the World Archaeological Congress. I've been able to make these presentations, and some of them have been published in peer-reviewed conference proceedings volumes. So I would say that you could go through your training, archaeological training, but keep your eyes and ears open and look for the archaeologists who are interested in alternative perspectives on archaeology. And if you want to talk further about this, my website is there, mcremo.com. Write to me, and we can discuss it further.
Excellent. All I can think of is the quote from the great physicist Max Planck that new ideas don't come to be accepted because their opponents accept them. It's because their opponents die, and new people who grew up, in our case at least, with Star Trek and Star Wars and alternative archaeological ideas come along and take over. So, well, that's not a direct quote from Planck, but you get the point. Okay, Ben's got another question here. This is from JJ in Lansing, Michigan.
Tell your guest, from my friends and myself, that any guy who takes on the scientific community the way he does is a real hero. And what is his opinion of the lost continent of Atlantis?
Well, the Atlantis can mean different things to different people. For some, it means specifically the lost, sunken island that the Greek philosopher Plato talked about in his works. More generally, it can mean any civilization that once existed above the surface of the earth, some advanced civilization that has now gone under the ocean. And in those terms, you can find elements of this in most of the world's great traditions. For example, in the ancient Sanskrit tradition, which I'm familiar with, there's the story of the fabulous city of Dwarka, which was on the western coast of India. It was a fabulously wealthy, opulent city, very advanced in terms of its level of civilization. About 5,000 years ago, it went under the sea. So this is a very common theme in many of the world's wisdom traditions, and I think there's evidence for it. Actually, according to modern science, the sea levels have been rising for the past 10,000 years or so, which means that vast areas of the earth that were once inhabited are now underwater. So that is one reason why marine archaeology, underwater archaeology, is becoming a very, very big field these days, because there are many inhabited areas of the earth that are now, that were once inhabited, that are now underwater. So it's a great field.
Okay. We have time for. Do we have time for one more? Okay. This is from Lonnie Ellis in Ontario, Canada. Take it away, Ben.
I'm wondering why. What is that word?
This has to do with the Book of Enoch.
Oh, Enoch. All right.
Yeah. It's one of our ancestors. Enoch. You know.
Oh, lol. Anyway, why Enoch's stories was discluded from the Bible, as well as any other stories. And also, sometimes can you do a Also, sometime can you do a program about what you learned from Genesis after studying Hebrew from that year? You rock. Thanks.
Yeah, it's kind of a general question addressed to all of us, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I mentioned the book of Enoch in my book, Human Devolution, because in it there are very elaborate descriptions showing that we live in a multi-level cosmos inhabited by all kinds of beings existing at the different levels. Why some books were not included in the Bible that we have today, I can't really say exactly, but it is a definite fact that there were a lot of books around a few thousand years ago, and only a few of them were selected to go into the Bible that we now have. And there may have been reasons for the exclusion. One of them may be accounts of reincarnation. That is one reason why some books have been excluded from the Bible, I believe.
Okay. Michael, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop here. We're just flat out of time. But we definitely want to have you back, and we'll continue this. And thank you so very much for being with us. It's been a wonderful interview.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, I'll
Love
be in
to
touch.
Be back with you.
Thank you. All right, bye-bye. Okay, Michael A. Cremo, Maverick archaeologist and author. And check our website, behindtheparanormal.com, for more information on him and some talking points. Okay, in the meantime, check out the new International Metaphysical University, intermetu.com. Accreditation is coming. I'm teaching 2 undergrad courses. My course up and running, Science, Religion, and the Paranormal. Coming soon, the Paranormal and Mental Illness. Check it out, because I need a new car. 3 Gallon Souls have accepted our call to become reporters for the show. A few others have replied, but I'm afraid their emails were lost. So please, if you did submit the reporter info form, please do so again. We do have a tendency to lose our emails from time to time. Reporters, we have Larry Clark from the beautiful Hudson Valley of New York State, and Cindy Marlowe from Kansas City, and Kyle Dalton, I believe, from Phoenix, Arizona. Wonderful people. Who are going to be calling in now and then to give us reports of interesting things going on paranormally in their areas of where they live. Thanks to our producer, dear old Craig Pelletier, our good friend. See you right here next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, WOON 1240 a.m., onworldwide.com, and we have the great Murray Silver returning by popular demand, Hollywood and Washington insider and paranormal expert. Check us out tomorrow night, CBS Radio, psychiconair.com. That'll be it for today. So we'll see you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.